So when you start using more and more of your coping mechanisms to get through the same day, right? You start to realize that that's one way you know that the stress is increasing. Hi, this is Neha Sangwan, and you're listening to Expansive Intimacy with Jim Young.
Welcome to Expansive Intimacy. I'm your host, Jim Young, and I'm on a quest to help men like you and me discover how to apply intimacy to unlock new, expansive versions of success in your relationships, your work, and your life. With each episode, we'll take another deep dive into the intimacy toolkit to show you how you can enhance your emotional intelligence, leadership abilities, and relationship skills. So settle in and open up, because it's time to get intimate. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Expansive Intimacy. I'm your host, Jim Young. This week, my guest is Dr. Neha Sangwan, who has a multidisciplinary resume that I'll get to in a second, really bringing a ton of big topics together and a ton of expertise around some of the subjects that are most interesting to me and that I think are most relevant to some things that are going on in the world. Burnout being one of them, one of my primary causes and passions. Neha has a book coming out in about a week from the time this episode launches, September 19th. Her book, Powered by Me, From Burnout to Fully Charged at Work and Life, will be out. I already have my copy on pre-order. And in the episode, we talk about her experience as a medical doctor going through burnout almost 20 years ago when burnout was barely even discussed. I didn't know about it back then, that's for sure. And the blessing of knowing as a medical doctor how to decipher her body's unique language, how to understand the signals and signs, and how she's brought that to people. And we actually do this in the episode. There are a lot of practical moments in the episode where Neha coaches me through how to use some of these practices, and you'll be able to use them just based on what she's coaching me through in the exercises on the show. She has some other models that I think you're going to find really helpful, looking at me, we, world as a way to look at how we're approaching a situation in our lives. We also explore a model of going from furious to curious, as well as 5 really powerful questions towards the end of the episode where she talks about a game-changing strategy she used with her patients in the hospital as they were being discharged to help them not just get the temporary relief from what was causing them problems, but to get through the long-term effects of stress that were causing them to end up in the hospital to begin with. Neha is the founder of Intuitive Intelligence. She's also a physician, an engineer, a speaker, a coach, a communication expert. Her practice spans corporate consulting, empowering individuals, working with leaders. She's really just a dynamo, and you'll see that in the episode. Besides being a 3-time TEDx speaker, she is soon to be the author of 2 books, and she's just doing some amazing work in the world. I'm excited to bring Neha Sangwan to you. Let's get her on the show. Hello, Neha. Welcome onto the show. I'm so excited to have you on, especially with your big launch coming up. Thanks for coming on.
It is an honor to be with you, Jim. I'm excited.
Well, as you know from what we've talked about, there's one question that's always scripted on this show that we start with, and that is, how do you define intimacy?
I think of intimacy as me trusting myself enough and you trusting yourself enough in an exchange that we can share what's closest to our hearts.
I've asked that question to so many people, both in writing my book and in running the podcast. And I think you're the first person to use the word trust. And I love we talk about, I hear vulnerability a lot, and vulnerability without trust is a tough combo. So how do we trust ourselves and each other to create that closeness?
Well, I think vulnerability without trust actually becomes trauma.
Yeah.
When I am vulnerable with you and then I am in a space where I don't feel safe, that ends up turning into something pretty scary,
Yeah.
right?
I've had numerous people, I've been in conversation with people, they've asked me, I've asked them the question about how do we build trust so that we can have safe vulnerability, psychological safety.
Mhm.
Curious, what are some of the ways, I mean, in your career and your personal life, you've found that you can build those kind of trusting steps to build towards that kind of intimacy?
Yeah, so if I'm building trust with myself, I think about it as picking something small, anything, making an agreement with myself. Like maybe I say, today, Neha, you're going to be in bed by 10 o'clock so that you get a good night's rest. You're going to start winding down at 10 p.m. If I make that agreement with myself and I keep it, I now start to trust myself more that I will take care of myself or that I will listen, that my mind will listen to my body when it needs rest. If I'm talking about how to build trust, I mean, obviously there's many more steps, right? But if someone wants a practical first step and beginning, it's make an agreement with yourself and keep it. The way that I think of it when I think of it between you and I, maybe psychological safety in an organization, in a family, I think about it around absolutely confidentiality. When I share something with you, do you hold that in confidence or do you tell other people? And same for me when you tell me something. And also, I think about, what are we talking about? What are you and I building our connection on? Are we building our connection on things like, I think Jane's having an affair with John, and that's why her and Mike broke up? So are we building our connection by telling each other things that are dramatic or gossip about other people? Because that's not really a very solid connection between you and I. So I think it's confidentiality and it's the content of what we connect on. I'd say that when we have different perspectives, trust would be built because you and I are curious with one another. We get curious, not furious about the differences in our perspective. I'd say that when I make a mistake, you would be showing me understanding and extend that curiosity to how am I doing and is everything okay? And, you know, do I have too much on my plate and might you be able to support me in some way? I think about reliability, which is that I can count on you. That not only what you say to me or tell me is accurate, but that it's repeatable. That if you and I make an agreement for us to do a podcast and I don't show up, or I show up 15 minutes later, I show up and I'm not ready. So there's an element of like, am I showing up and does this matter? Right? Am I showing up appropriately? But more than that, it's about am I consistent with you over time?
Yeah, I hear a lot of care in that, that there's
Yeah.
a caring, both what I share, how I share, the agreements that we have made, and am I honoring those? And just for listeners, Neha showed up 8 minutes early, not 15 minutes late. I love that. I am totally a early is on time person. And, all kidding aside, it's, we had gotten excited when we talked several months ago about some shared topics, and I was excited to have you on the show. And there's a genuineness in knowing that you've been very responsive in our process of coordinating the show, and you showed up early and we got a chance to connect, which is lovely. And I loved the curious, not furious. I haven't heard that one before. I'm logging that in my toolkit. Yeah, how do we pause when something feels dissonant to us?
Yep.
Instead of getting disrupted, get curious. Are there
Yeah.
practices for you on that? How have you built grooves in your brain to do that over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first one is, and this is actually chapter 4 of the book, but it's deciphering the unique language of your body. So as a doctor, one of the biggest things I was taught in school was to override my own body's need for sleep, going to the bathroom, or eating in service of the next trauma, the next heart attack, the next stroke coming into the emergency room. So, my job and how I was trained was to check out of my own body, and that it was a noble badge of honor for me to care more about others. It worked for a little while until I hit, the wall of burnout. But more than that, even if our listeners have known that there's been times in their lives where they needed to make it over a deadline, survive, not thrive, they may have gone through a time where they learned to override their body. And I think this is a really important thing, which is a lot of us are more tuned into what other people need more than we know what we need. And there's a danger in our world today of, oh, doesn't that make me a narcissist that all I care about is myself? I really want to be careful about going to extremes in anything. But what I will say is there's something called me, we, world that I speak about. When we're talking about burnout, when we're talking about intimacy, you'll notice you asked me about trust. So now I go to me, we, world. Okay. Self-trust, us trusting, and then us having faith in a bigger system or a nation or a world.
Some kind of
And
spiritual
so,
belief.
yeah. And so really the way that I think through things is in that me, we, world way. So for me, it's starting with understanding, deciphering your body's unique language. So for
I
many
love
years,
that. When I read that in the notes in our back and forth prep, I'm like, oh, I want to know about deciphering my own body, because I think we get so disconnected. So many of us operate from the neck up. So yeah, like how do we do that? How do we decipher what our body's telling us?
well, let's do it right now. Why don't we do it for our listeners?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just ask you some questions then, and you and I will kind of go through this, and I'll do it and you can do it, and then they can be doing it as well. So the first thing you do is ground yourself in your body right here, right now. So feel gravity pulling you down. Perhaps you're sitting in a chair, you're standing. So feel your bottom against the chair, the couch, wherever you are, or your feet on the floor, and feel that space where gravity is pulling you down, but you are supported.
Mm-hmm.
And become really aware of that. Now take a nice, slow, deep breath in and out, and feel your rib cage expanding and contracting with each breath. And then I want you to bring to mind something in your life that's in your comfort zone. Maybe you do it every day or you do it often. What's something in your life, Jim, that's in your comfort zone? You could be on autopilot and it happens every day. What would that be?
Yeah, I would say probably communicating with my partner, texting my partner when we're not together.
Okay, beautiful. I would say for me, really, I kind of go straight to my computer in the morning, and it's funny. I have a whole little setup, and I get up, I do my thing in the bathroom, and all of the getting ready, and I just move right into that space like pretty effortlessly. Like I'm excited to see what came in overnight. Right? So I'd say me kind of sitting down, getting ready, and excited for work. So that's in my comfort zone, and you have yours. Now, how do you actually know that in your body? Well, when we're talking about it, now I want you to not just give me what's in your thoughts or your brain, but I want you to actually feel your body as we talk about this. So, are you feeling tight, constricted, or heavy anywhere? And you can check in a little bit. Or are you feeling open, easy, light? I mean, I got a smile on my face when I just said to you, I kind of effortlessly move in to like,
Uh-huh.
wonder what is there,
Yeah, there was an energy when you said that. It's almost like this playful, like childlike, like ooh,
Yeah.
Christmas morning or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wonder. And so for you too, when you're picking up your phone because you're texting your partner, right? Just notice how your body feels in that moment. It's something that's in your comfort zone. It brings you connection, probably intimacy. And so all of these things, just notice your body and your mind. So when your mind answers, you also are checking in to make sure your body's open, relaxed, and aligning with the question we're asking. Okay. Would you agree that that's the case?
Yeah. And what I noticed when you said start to check in with your body, I just felt my chest muscles loosen and my shoulders
Mm.
drop a little bit when I started to think about, oh, I'm going to connect with my partner. It's this
Yeah. Yeah.
relaxing, soothing space for me.
Yeah. And if people are struggling with this and they're like, what do you mean to pay attention to my body? A
Yeah.
good thing to do would be pay attention to how loose or tight or just right your waistline is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to the expansion and contraction of your ribs. If it still doesn't happen for you, what a good way is to grab a stone or like a ear pod case
Uh-huh.
and hold on to that when you're in meetings or in a conversation. Because if you can't feel your body
Mm.
inside to balance it with the external world going on, you can always say to yourself, I can feel this in my hand.
I love that. So if I'm doing that, because this is great because it's so practical and I can be hand under the table
Mhm.
or my Zoom screen and I'm holding on to this object.
Yeah.
And if I notice that I'm trying to crush that thing into dust, what do I do next?
Well, what it gives you is awareness.
Yeah.
And so awareness is the first step because if you're unaware of something, you're going to react rather than respond. So, what we're doing here is solely bringing awareness. Most people focus externally and have no idea what's going on internally. And the first time they know something's going on internally is when someone else says, are you okay? Or they
Mm-hmm.
react and they're like, whoa, what did I just do? So they've either crossed a boundary and now we got to pull them back, or they don't have awareness. So awareness is a big first step. The second thing I'd say is you have to know and decipher your body's language. So I used to have throat constriction. It started off kind of mild when I was younger. It got stronger as the stakes got higher in my life. If I was going to lose a tennis, and it was a tennis tournament and it was the finals, if I thought I'd look like a failure in front of people because what if I don't get into medical school? Oh my God, what if I don't pass this engineering test? So there were all these experiences in my life. And as the stakes became higher, this throat constriction just kept getting more consistent, stronger, and having like a vice like grip to the point that I almost felt like I couldn't breathe. So now I'm in medical school and I am in such distress that I convinced two GI doctors, okay, gastrointestinal doctors, to put me under anesthesia and put a scope down me and look to make sure that I don't have cancer because I'm learning about all these different cancers. And I'm convinced that my throat should be fine and I should be able to breathe. And because I'm not, something must be growing in there.
Mm.
After the second one got me off the table, he said, what do you do for a living? And I said, oh, I'm a fourth year medical student. And he looked at me and said, that's your body's stress response. You need to learn how to manage your stress. And while I was relieved that I didn't have cancer, I was even more perplexed on what I was supposed to do with this. And there is an answer for those of you listening. So throat constriction and stomach turning is what tells me, and we're taking them to the next level here. When you get to the edge of your comfort zone and now you're moving into the uncomfortable zone, or what I refer to as the learning zone. When you get out of your comfort zone, what's one thing right now that gets you out of your comfort zone that you're encountering? What are you learning right now, growing in?
My least favorite thing to do is like salesy outreach to say like, hey, don't you wanna check this thing out that I do? Like, I know I do great work and I just don't want to talk to you about it that way.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, me too, because launching this book in September has, when you work this long on something, this. When you work this long, you put this much passion into it and you think it can help a lot of people. When I think of it as sales, I get all creeped out. And when I think of it as, do I think this can help someone? And might it make a difference in someone's life? Might my pain simplified and made practical become someone else's survival guide? And then I get excited. But I will tell you, that's kind of mine right now, too, which is all the different ways that I'm supposed to promote the book and I'm supposed to do all this stuff. So the way that I know is there's a slight tightening right in my throat. And there's a bit of a swirling in my stomach, kind of like the feeling of a pit in my stomach a little bit as we're talking right now. Can you feel anything in your body as we're talking about the salesy outreach experience?
Oh yeah, like where my chest muscles just, relax before. I feel my shoulders creeping up and my jaws clenching a little bit. Like those are my tells
Yep.
is, everything scrunches up around the neck and jawline for me.
And I have to say, I think my reason for this is that I don't want to be rejected. And I don't want people to think I don't care about them. I want them to know that I care deeply. And it becomes my job to also be the face and the name of this message. Right. And so there's people who have the gift of sales. My father, people can say no to him a million times, doesn't even faze him. Gets up, says it again. Oh, you're the one who's going to be missing out. And he goes to the. So, what I want people to know is what's in my learning zone may be in my dad's comfort zone. And so that's why it's your body's unique language communicating with you about you. Okay. So now let's say we've exceeded our comfort zone. We are now into what I call the panic zone. How does your body let you know? So for me, it was the first time I had to do a code blue in the hospital. I'm a little bit not in the panic zone, but I'd say, let's say I'm getting to the edge of learning right now as I see my schedule for the fall. Where I'm like, oh boy, like how am I going to live what I teach other people to do when my schedule is as full as it is right now? And I just said this. I was like, my partner asked me, we're both going on book tour together, and he asked me, like, okay, so you finished packing for the next 10 days. Can you pack me? And I'm like, pack you? Like, like what? And so the way that I notice I'm getting to the edge of my learning zone is, first of all, I need to get curious, not furious, because that's really sweet of him to ask me, because it was so sweet. He's like, if we're on stage together, I want to know what you're wearing so that we look like we go together. And I was like, oh, that's so thoughtful. I know I'm getting to the end of my stretching myself because I experienced that as like, no way, like, don't do it. Right. And so, what I would say is, how do we know that we're getting from the learning zone to the panic zone? So for me, it's because I feel almost like I have headphones on. When you put those noise canceling headphones, nothing's going in, nothing's going out. For some people, it would be a more severe throat constriction, more intense version of comfort zone to learning zone symptoms. For other people, it's completely different. So the moment I'm on stage or I'm speaking in public, that's a fear a lot of people have. Sometimes I can go into that space where all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow, nothing's going in, nothing's coming out. Like, I better breathe right now. I better feel my feet on the ground. I better get back in this body right here, right now. So, what would be something that could get you out of your learning zone and a little bit into the panic zone?
Oh, I think it's any time that I feel unprepared. I feel
Mm,
like I'm exposed and I'm gonna be, I'm just not ready and
yeah. So,
things are
you know what
happening.
that would be about? That would be about not looking foolish.
Yeah, I don't wanna look foolish because I don't it's interesting. I do improv comedy as a way to practice how to get better at this. And the
Yeah.
worst outcome if I screw up is people will laugh, which is why they're there anyways. And yet it's still translating it into my everyday life. I still
Yeah.
have that sense of, oh, the stakes are higher here. This is a different
Mhm.
situation. And I don't want people to think I don't have my stuff together.
You bet. So, when you're speaking about this, and it's one of those moments, how does your body let you know you've moved out of the learning zone or the uncomfortable zone into the panic zone? You
I,
know?
I know that I feel it like in the back of my throat. And this is weird. Maybe it feels like there's a racing feeling in the back of my throat. And that's
Mhm.
the only way I know how to describe it
Yep,
is
yep.
just this energy. Yeah.
Yeah, moving. It's moving. So, do you see how you and I have different things that have us in the comfort zone, the learning zone, the panic zone? That's our unique way. And there's unique ways through physical signals, through the intensity of it, through where it's located, through whether it's, intermittent or consistent. That's going to give you clues as to how long you've been letting it continue. And so there's different ways that people override those signals they've been taught to because we have a society that's moving at a faster and faster pace every day. And so just in order to keep up, I remember when they told me you're going to do 36-hour shifts every third night and you'll be doing this for many months of the year. And I was like, oh my God. So I developed a time tested equation. The stakes were pretty high. I'm in the hospital. I'm the doctor overnight, right? 2 ice cold 16-ounce Mountain Dews plus a king size Snickers bar, and you could get me functioning for 36 hours straight. And then I would go home and sleep for 17, right? But that's how I made it over the finish line.
Hey guys, it's Jim. Thanks for listening to the show. If you're enjoying these episodes and are wanting to bring a little bit more of those relational skills into your work and your life, get in touch. I keep a couple of slots open for one-on-one coaching with guys to help them develop their emotional intelligence, their relationship skills, their leadership ability, all so that they could live the most successful and happy lives possible. Just email me at jim@thecenteredcoach.com. We can have a short call to see how I might be able to help you.
So everybody listening, when they have a challenging, when you have a challenging deadline, when there's something where your body's telling you you're tired or it can't do something or it's needs something, but you don't have time to give it to your body, what are the time tested strategies that you use? So I call mine the caffeine buzz strategy. Do you have ones that you use?
For me, one of my best strategies is actually trying to slow things down, like going out for a 30-minute walk is one of
Mm,
my strategies for,
nice. So you connect to nature, you connect to your
yeah.
own body, you slow things down. I love that. So then there's the sleep it off, snooze it off strategy.
Mm.
There's the zone out on Netflix strategy. There's the exercise it off strategy. There's everything's better with chocolate strategy.
I also use that.
And they're all okay. It's sometimes it was, I'd like a glass of wine to take the edge off my day, which through the pandemic turned into, could you just hand me the bottle? Right. So when you start using more and more of your coping mechanisms to get through the same day, right? You start to realize that that's one way that the stress is increasing. And so those are big clues. People usually don't know until, a big catastrophe happens and then they say, how did I get here? And what I can not like I do a history and physical of someone who has an illness. I also do a history and physical of their numbing strategies, their coping mechanisms. How did you zero out the clues from your body? Because
Mm.
your body is polite. It knows you're busy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it starts with a whisper,
Mm.
a little annoying thing on my shoulder here. And then if I'm not listening, it gets a little louder. And now I have pink
Persistent.
in my neck.
Uh-huh.
And if I'm not paying attention, I will develop a headache. And if I really don't pay attention, it knocks me over with a 2x4 and I'm out sick with back pain the next day and I can't move. But what I want you to know is it doesn't go from 0 to 100, instantly. That's not how the body works. Your physiology has been adjusting and changing, and it's got these amazing mechanisms that can adjust to you in the world.
Yeah.
But if we numb out that feedback, we miss the real signals. So I hope that helps with deciphering your body.
Totally. And I realize that, you asked, what are my coping mechanisms? My coping mechanisms now do include dark chocolate, not in copious amounts, in moderation,
Yeah.
and getting out for walks in nature and sitting down to read and meditating. And those are not the healthy coping mechanisms that I had, or the unhealthy coping mechanisms that I had years ago.
What'd you have years ago? Give us
Oh,
those.
it was tuning out to technology. I'm a big sports fan. I would just like jump on and read sports articles or check
Yep.
latest scores. It was drinking. It was,
Yep.
just anything that was kind of mindless and kept me away from what was real and causing me stress.
Well, the really important thing for people to know is I don't think that there's good and not good coping mechanisms, because the one thing that I would tell you is that coping mechanism is protecting that human
Mm-hmm.
from something that they are unsure or unaware or don't know how to handle.
Yeah.
And so at that point in their life, they are surviving. And so that coping mechanism is better than the pain underneath it, the stress underneath it, the thing they don't know how to solve. So I actually thank my coping mechanisms. That's why I give them names like everything's better with chocolate,
Uh-huh.
and the caffeine buzz strategy. Yeah, it probably damaged my body quite a bit while I was in residency. But you know what? I didn't know how to do it any other way. And so good for me that I figured out how to survive a system that I now can help people in the world. So what I say is it's oftentimes a summer fling that becomes a bad marriage. And so what you got to do is when you recognize it and you gain awareness, it's time to spend a little less time together, you know? And so, what is it that you can do? Because you probably don't need what you needed years ago. You might just be in a habit of it. And so you really want to get that's where you get curious, not furious. And you start to say, what have I outgrown? What worked for me at a time in my life when I needed it? Those Mountain Dews and king size Snickers. Boy, my body now revolts. It literally, I have headaches. I don't feel well. I mean, I can't have alcohol like I used to have alcohol. I literally have to ask myself, do you want to not feel okay all day tomorrow? You get to make a choice. And so that's what I would say to people. If it's working for you, that's fine. But there may come a day where it doesn't work. Thank it. Thank it for its service.
Yeah.
And then figure out how you two can spend a little less time together.
I'm realizing in that like, one of the big strategies that I had that I didn't name it was the biggest strategy was work. I would just dive into work. I would spend more time in the office. I would work, in the evenings. I would be obsessive about it.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons. And you and I both have burnout stories. And I think you've already teased into some of yours. And I know in the medical industry that burnout is rampant and it's at crisis levels. And part of why I really wanted to have you on the show was to talk about how burnout is affecting people through a story like yours, and also like where can we go once we have that sense of like, oh, my throat gets constricted, oh, I'm using caffeine or I'm using alcohol, or oh, my conditions aren't the ones that I feel like I can thrive in. Where do we go? So I'd love to invite a little bit more of your burnout journey into the story today, and then see where we can take that.
Sure, I'd love to. So I remember it clear as day, June 17th, 2004. And I was a hospital physician, pretty much not only with my own 18 patients to see, but holding the pager that takes all air traffic control from incoming cases. And I started at 6 a.m, and by 11 a.m., I had seen 2 patients out of 18. And I turned to the nurse and I said, Nina, could you please get 40 milliequivalents of IV potassium for the gentleman in 636? And she said, are you okay, Dr. Sangwan? And first of all, that was my first indication I might not be. And I said, yeah, why? And she said, that's the 4th time in under 5 minutes you've asked me the same question, and I've answered you every time. And that's how tuned out of my body and my ability to function. I literally had to hit a brick wall where I was I was stuck on repeat, and somebody outside me had to say, "Are you okay?" And even then, I didn't know what she was talking about. So when that level of overwhelm, sensory overload, is going on, I had become very accustomed to just adjusting, adjusting, adjusting. And 1 hour later, after and in the book, it's chapter 2, I say the basics of burnout, where I literally give you me in the psychiatrist's office. So 2 doctors sitting down, having a conversation about what is this thing called burnout and what's happening to me and how come no one told me that this is a thing. And so I go through all of that and they put me on leave. They put me on medical leave. And I cannot tell you how confused I was. So I did a lot of research when I was at home and I figured out that stress causes or exacerbates more than 80% of illness. So I wanted to know when I came back, hey guys, why once we stabilize our patients physically, the night before we discharge them from the hospital, why don't we ask them what's at the root of their stress? Because Mr. Jones comes in with a heart attack. I give him everything I'm supposed to. We get him through this. And 2 years later, Mr. Jones is back in another room in the ER with another heart attack. Like, how can that be? I think it's because we're not addressing the underlying stress. We're just band-aiding him through a crisis. And they said to me, which shocked me, many versions of this is what I got. Just like you wouldn't order a test that you didn't know what to do with the result, why on earth would I ask a question that I didn't know what to do with the answer and don't have the time to explore? And I got so upset that I committed my life to not only healing myself. I mean, the stakes were high for me, but I realized how little we had been trained on this, how little we knew in the medical system, how little we were interested in learning about this. And so for the last 20 years, this is what I've done. And I figured out, listen, I'm not perfect. I can still do all or none. I probably have a little bit of what you have, maybe a lot, where my work is my joy. I have a partner. I have nieces and nephews. I don't have children. But my work, writing books, speaking to people, coaching, helping dysfunctional cultures transform into healing organizations, it lights me up. It is so much fun. And so when I can see that in the world, someone goes from pain to purpose, when they can see an answer, that's one of my big things. So that changed me because I realized I was going to need to do this, and I wasn't going to get a lot of support. So I asked the hospital if they would support me in funding like a few extra hours if I started to ask people what was at the root of their stress. And they said, no, we're not interested in that. So I decided to do it anyway with my 18 patients each day, right? Whenever they were getting ready for discharge, and thousands of them in a row, all answered the question, all knew why they were sick, what was at the root of their stress, and what they needed to do. So I'd say to them, all right, Jim, you are doing really well, and I'm going to get ready to discharge you tomorrow. Stress causes or exacerbates more than 80% of all illness. I'd love to see you again at the grocery store or the theater, just not here. So and I'd pull it was in the early 2000s, I would pull a prescription pad out of my pocket because that's all I had. And I would write, here's 5 questions. If the nurse tells me tomorrow that you've journaled on these and pages me, I will give you an extra 20 minutes where you and I are going to explore what's at the root of your stress and help you start to heal it. There was not a single patient who didn't take me up on that. So these are the 5 questions, and I call it the awareness prescription. So, and by the way, for everyone listening, it doesn't just need to be for health. It can be for any challenge that you're facing in your life. So question number 1, why this? Why a heart attack? Why not your liver or your left leg? Why did this part of what's the significance of this part of your body breaking down? Question number 2, why now? Why not 2 weeks ago or 3 years from now? What is the message your body needed you to get in this moment that it stopped you in your tracks? Question number 3, since hindsight's often 2020, what signals, symptoms, patterns might you have missed that make perfect sense now? Question number 4, what else in your life needs to be healed? And question number 5, if you spoke from the heart, what would you say to me?
Those are powerful questions. And as you were reading them off, I'm both listening to them as the presumptive patient, hearing that from my doctor and thinking, wow, those are the questions. And I'm also thinking about it through the lens that you and I both tend to work in our professions these days in organizations. Those are the same questions, as you said, they can be used in other places.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Business.
Why
culture.
this? Why now?
Yeah.
What did I miss?
Yeah. Like, what are the patterns here? What didn't I see that makes sense now? And so it's not about blaming anybody. It's about,
right.
Asking, being curious, taking accountability of maybe things we may not have seen or known, having grace for ourselves and each other, being kind, having compassion, not beating ourselves up. And then, of course, I thought everybody in the world was ready for self-awareness because every single one of my patients did it. And then here's the big thing I saw. Early in my career, before I burned out, I would get flowers, chocolates, cards from people's wife, daughter, son saying, thanks for saving my dad. You're amazing. We love you. Okay. Once I started asking these questions and helping them get to the root of what was causing their stress, the patients themselves would write and say things like this. Doc, you know how I told you I've been on migraine medication since I was 28? I only need half the dose now. Hey, doc, you know how I said I have to use my sleep medications every night? I haven't used it in a week. Hey, doc, the anxiety that I thought was hereditary, I am off my medication now. You're never going to believe the blood pressure medicine I was on. My doc took me off it because he said I'm getting dizzy and that's the cause. Do you think stress is related to high blood pressure? The questions they would ask me and what they would say about the results and who was thanking me shifted. And that's how I knew I had moved from band-aiding a symptom to solving root cause of a problem. And so my job is to be the catalyst. They, of course, did all the work, but I could help them. And really, something really big I want people to know is that your inability to communicate with yourself and each other makes you physically ill. So if you ignore, let me just explain this real quick. So if people come in to the hospital or a doctor's office, and let's say they're having chest discomfort, if you're 50, 60 years old, 40 years old, whatever, the first thing people think is, oh my God, make sure it's not a heart attack. Okay. So let's say you come in and I run the EKG for the electrical rhythm. I do the blood work and maybe I even put you on a stress test or do an echocardiogram because maybe you have a family history or something. Doctors will then come out and say this. Jim, nothing's wrong with you. Awesome. We're getting you ready for discharge. And you can go, the nurse will take care of this, do this follow up. And said, okay, meanwhile, you're thinking to yourself, that same thing I was thinking to myself when the anesthesiologist and the GI doctor looked at me and basically said, oh, this is stress. You're thinking to yourself, something is wrong, but you're telling me it's not.
I'm furious that you're not being curious.
Well, their job, and I wish that this is one of the things I'm really working hard to get doctors to do differently. There's good news and there's bad news, Jim. The good news is your electrical rhythm and your heart's pumping function are awesome. You did not have a heart attack and your heart is healthy and strong. Yep. Here's the bad news. The bad news is there's something on a mental, emotional, social, or spiritual level for you that's not being addressed, and it's showing up in your physical body. Do you have any idea what that might be?
I would love to have that question posed to every patient because as I talk about with expansive intimacy, it's about physical and it's about mental and it's about emotional and it's about spiritual. And it maps over to
Yes.
how we feel inside. It's in our relationships. And I think we get stuck at the surface level. We don't
Well, we're all
explore
focused on
enough.
physical. We're
Yeah.
all focused on physical,
Yeah. It
right?
comes up with intimacy, right?
Right.
When you say
Yep.
the word intimacy, we think we know what that means.
Yeah.
And the same thing with health. We know what
Yes.
health means. It's, oh, you're not having a heart attack. You're fine.
Well, that's why, I mean, in the book, I started with physical health, mental health, emotional health, social health, and spiritual health. And somebody said to me, is that really what you mean to say? I know you're a doctor. And I said, no, actually, what you're talking about in burnout is energy. It's about physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, social energy, and spiritual energy. Because it's about whether you have a net gain or a net drain of energy on one or more of those levels that determines where you are on the spectrum from burned out to fully charged. And so it really helped me get clear on how I could demystify burnout, how I could personalize it to the reader, because how you burn out is as unique to you as each person's fingerprint. The choices you've made, the place you were raised,
Thousands or millions of
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah. And so that was really kind of part of the genesis of all of this.
I love that linking of the term charged up and the energies
Mhm.
that go in, whether it's our spiritual, our emotional, our physical, our mental energies.
Yeah.
Emily Nagoski and Amelia Nagoski wrote a book on burnout that talks about how stress lives in our body when we don't complete the stress cycle. It's physiologically living in us. And so that tension, that feeling in our chest, whatever it is that energy isn't flowing. And an
Right.
electrical system doesn't work. It doesn't stay charged up if the energy doesn't move. And so I love those powerful questions in your awareness prescription are such a fantastic way to invite, how do we move the energy again? How do we keep
Yes.
it flowing?
And I think of that in emotions too. I think of emotions as energy in motion. And
Hmm.
when we stuff them or ignore them or sweep them under the rug or whatever we do, ru- they get stuck inside of us. And if we don't feel, reveal, and heal them, we really gotta reveal, feel, and heal them, because then they can move again. And boy, I had some of the most amazing conversations with those patients. I knew when I just needed to sit down on the bed and just say, hold on a minute, let me go grab a chai, and we're gonna get through this, because we can. We can do hard things. We can do this. Because I think what's harder is carrying around those bricks inside you and trying to keep moving forward when it feels harder and harder each day. And each person will know when they're ready to set that down, you know?
That's such a healing approach to me. And you mentioned healing organizations and healing people. And I think there's a symmetry in there. And that oftentimes it is just, I'm going to be witness with you. I'm going to open up a space where we can talk about what has been going on. What do these signals? How do I decipher what the body, whether it's my physical body or the body of our organization, is telling us right now
Mhm.
that needs to be healed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely.
yeah. Neha, there is so much richness in this, and I hope that listeners are taking away some of those questions and the invitation to pause and check in and slow things down a little bit, because I think that's where a lot of the answers lie. I'm so excited to get my copy of your book. It's coming. I can't encourage listeners more to check out Neha's work. She's this is her second book. I've already listened to the first one. There's some great stuff coming about burnout, one of my favorite topics to try and help with. Neha, could you just share for a minute with our listeners a little bit more about where they can find the book, where they can find you, if you're going to be in their city doing a book tour, anything like that?
Sure. Well, the book is called Powered by Me, From Burned Out to Fully Charged at Work and in Life. You can get it anywhere you buy books. It's all over. My website is where you're going to find our specific links and all of that. So it's called intuitiveintelligenceinc.com. So there's an INC at the end, intuitiveintelligenceinc.com. If you do intuitiveintelligenceinc.com /powered-by-me, you go to the book page. If you do /events, you can see our book tour and our the places that are public that we'll be traveling to. Both Raj and I, my partner, have written books and released them this year. His is called Awaken. So it's a leadership book and it's his memoir. And so we call it the Energize and Awaken Tour. And so that is on the events page. You might say tour. And so when you click there, you can go down and anything that's public has a register button on it. So you can register and see us there. We're really going all over. So I'd be happy to see any of you on the road. And we're going to try and bring all of this to organizations, companies. And my dream is cities and countries. Why are we not, trying to have conscious cities and countries? So this is just the beginning. Would love you to be on that. And I guess I should also say September 27th, the 9 a.m. hour, I'll be on the Today Show. And I'm teaching about, they want to ask me about how do you say no? And so we'll be doing that. And then a bunch of articles. So Fast Company, Inc., Popular Science, Forbes Women, a bunch of them will be coming out in September. So thank you, Jim, for creating this podcast. You're one of the efforts that I'm putting forward to make sure that people get this. And I really, really enjoy your energy.
Thank you, Neha. And I know Raj's work as well. And I can't imagine more of to borrow the phrase, a power couple to be going out and doing a roadshow on the things that our world needs the most. So I'm just so excited for the two of you to be out there, for your book to be coming out. And I'm going to have to look at that schedule myself and see if I can get to one of your events. I'd love to see you in person. So
Amazing.
Thanks again. Yeah, thanks again for coming on.
You're in Massachusetts?
I am. I'm in Western Massachusetts, out in the Happy Valley, as we like to call it out here.
All right, Jim. I'm adding you to the Boston stuff if you want to come.
Please do. Yeah.
All right.
Neha,
awesome.
Thanks for coming on the show, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. I really look forward to seeing you next week on Expansive Intimacy with me, Jim Young. I'd also love your help with expanding intimacy even further. Will you take a minute right now to rate the show and write a review? It's the best way for us to bring more people into the conversation. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.